Welcome back. Now we've added a socket to our right hand bone on the skeleton. And we added a preview mesh so we can see what it looks like if we put a sword in Echo's hand. Now, we're going to want some animations appropriate for sword combat. In fact, when she's just standing here, the hand isn't really gripping the sword. And it would be nice if we had animations for holding a weapon in the hand. So we're going to have to look to external sources for animations. Now, one of the best free sources for animations is Mixamo. The link will be in the resources for this video. Now, once you go to Mixamo.com, you're going to want to sign up for free if you don't already have a Mixamo account. And once you've signed up, you can log in, and once you're in, you'll be in Mixamo where we have two sections, characters and animations. Now, if you click on characters, there are a number of meshes that we can use. These are skeletal meshes that are fully rigged with skeletons, and they can be used with any of the animations here on Mixamo. Now, it doesn't really matter which one we choose, but we do need to choose one if we're going to use animations from the Mixamo site. Now, I'm going to use this one. It's called XBot, and you can find it by searching for XBot. There's an XBot and a YBot. Now, XBot is just a basic mesh. There's really not much to it, but this is how we're going to be able to download animations from Mixamo. We need one of the Mixamo characters. So after picking one, we can click on Download, and it's going to have some settings. We can leave these at their defaults. The format needs to be .fbx. This is the file format for a mesh, such as a static mesh or a skeletal mesh. And the pose is set to T-pose, which is the pose we see here. The body is shaped like the letter T. We're going to download this. And as soon as we do, we should have this file in our downloads folder, xbot.fbx. And this file contains all the information associated with the skeletal mesh XBot. And we can get this into our project. Now, I'd like to store all the stuff we download from Mixamo. Here's my project file. And I can right-click and make a new folder here just to store these files from Mixamo. I'm going to call this new folder Assets. And in Assets, I'm going to right-click, create a new folder, and call this Mixamo. And here in the Mixamo folder, I'm going to move my xbot.fbx. I'm going to place it in there, and now I have it here in my Assets folder. And I can even get this into Unreal Engine. Here's my Unreal Engine project. And here in my Unreal Engine project, I'm going to make a new folder in Content. So I'm going to right-click on Content, make a new folder, and I'm going to call this Mixamo. And in Mixamo, I can right-click, make a new folder, and call this XBot. And here's where I'm going to put that XBot mesh. Now we can import this into our project. Just because we added an assets folder to our overall project structure does not mean it's in our project. It's just in the folder where our project exists. To get it in our project, we have to import it and make sure it's in the content folder. So here in my new XBot folder, I'm going to click Import and go out to my overall project level, double-click Assets, Mixamo, and get that xbot.fbx and click Open. Now I'm presented with the FBX import options. And when we import a skeletal mesh, we're always asked if we'd like to assign a skeleton to it. We can click the drop-down and see all the different skeletons that belong to the assets in our project. But XBot has its own skeleton, so we don't want to select a skeleton. In fact, we can just leave all of these settings at their defaults and click Import. Now we're going to be presented with a warning that says no smoothing group information was found in this FBX scene. This happens all the time when we import FBXs. Sometimes they don't have smoothing groups, and that's okay. It gives us another warning, and it says this warning can happen for bones that are not vert weighted. And it says if these bones are not in the correct orientation after importing, set the Use T0 as ref pose option, or add them to the bind pose and re-import the skeletal mesh. We don't need to worry about that, so we can close this warning message, and now in our XBot folder, we have several things. These are all assets included in the .fbx file for XBot. We have two materials, and these materials are assigned to the mesh, and here is the mesh, XBot. hovering over it, we see that it's a skeletal mesh. We can double click it and see that this is exactly what the XBot skeletal mesh looks like on the Mixamo website. And in the asset details, under material slots, we have two different materials, a sort of dark pink and a light pink. Now, opening our content browser, it's usually a good idea to keep all materials in their own folder. So I'm going to right click, create a new folder here in XBot, and call this materials. And I'm going to select both of these materials and drag them into the materials folder and select move here. And now they'll be moved into the materials folder. Now, skeletal meshes are usually prefixed with some letters to tell us that this asset is a skeletal mesh. We can use SKM for skeletal mesh to rename this to SKM XBot. Next, we have a physics asset. We mentioned physics assets when we saw a bunch of capsules around our echo characters skeletal mesh. We can even double click to see what the physics asset looks like. And they're usually a bunch of capsules, but they don't have to be. They can be any number of shapes. We're going to close out of that. And we also have the XBot skeleton. We can rename this to SK, short for skeleton, XBot. And now we have a skeletal mesh from Mixamo. Now, the reason we need this skeletal mesh is because the Mixamo animations are made specifically for the skeleton on Mixamo characters. We can't use them directly on our Echo character. We'll have to go through some extra steps to be able to do that, and we will. But for now, we have this Mixamo character in our project. And now we can download some animations from Mixamo that use this skeleton. So we'll head back over to Mixamo and we'll click on animations. And I'm going to clear the search bar and we'll see that there are all kinds of animations and we can preview them by clicking on them. And we'll see what they look like in this viewport here. And we can even click and drag to rotate around, hold Alt and right click and drag to move in and out, and we can get a good view of what these animations look like. And there are quite a lot here. And there are even some animations designed for weapons. We can search for sword, for example, and here are some animations designed for swords. We have one designed for a sword and shield, but we don't have a shield, so that's not something we want right now. There's also a set of animations designed for a greatsword. This would be a very large weapon that requires two hands. Now, our weapon is a bit smaller. We kind of want to use just one hand. And there's a set of animations that are good for that. We can search for axe. And there are these animations designed for a one-handed weapon, like an axe, or in our case, a small sword. So we can download some of these animations. And these are all pretty good looking. If we look at unarmed equip, underarm, it looks like we're pulling a sword out from the back. Unarmed equip over is pulling a sword from above the shoulder. These look great. And we even have some locomotion-related animations, such as walking, standing idle, and so on. Now, I'd like this standing idle. We can see that the right hand is closed as if it's holding a weapon, and the left hand is open. This is perfect. So I'm going to download this animation by clicking Download, and we have some download settings. Now, we can leave the format at FBX. Frames per second is how many frames per second this animation contains. We can change it, but I'm going to leave it at 30. 30 is plenty, and Unreal Engine will smoothly blend between frames. So we're not going to have a choppy animation or anything like that. Now, with skin means we'll download the mesh along with the animation data, but we can choose without skin as we already have the mesh. Keyframe reduction can be left at none, and we can select Download. Now we can see in our Downloads folder, we now have this standing idle animation. And I can pull up my slash folder and open Assets, where I have Mixamo, and here next to my XBot, I'm going to make a new folder called Animations. And inside of Animations, I'm going to move my standing idle animation. I'll drag it right in there. Now, while we're at it, I'd like to see what an attack animation would look like. And there are plenty of attack animations. I like this one, Standing Melee Attack. I'm going to download this one as well. And in my Downloads folder, I see it here, Standing Melee Attack Horizontal.fbx. And I'm going to move that into my Animations folder along with standing idle. So now we have a couple of animations. It's time to get these into our project. So back in Unreal Engine, I'm going to find my XBot folder and make a new folder here for animations. And I'll call this animations. And in the animations folder, I'm going to import these animations by clicking import and finding those animations I downloaded. I'll start with standing idle and click open. Now, we have FBX import options because animations themselves are FBX files. And when we're importing animations, we now know that these animations use the Mixamo skeleton. In our project, it's called SKXBot. We need to choose that skeleton as we know this is the skeleton that's compatible with these Mixamo animations. So I'm going to click the drop-down and search for XBot and choose SKXBot. And with that skeleton selected, we can click import and we now have an animation sequence called standing idle. And if we double click it, we see what it looks like. It's using the XBot skeletal mesh and it's an idle and it looks great. Now, I know what you're thinking. We're not using XBot for our game project. We're not going to switch over to XBot. Don't worry. We're going to learn how to get this animation working for our character, Echo. Those will be the next steps we take. But until then, I'd like to get my other animation into our project. So here in XBot Animations, let's import Standing Melee Attack Horizontal, click Open, and we have to select the XBot skeleton. So selecting SKXBot and clicking Import, I now have this second animation, which is an attack animation. And again, it looks great. It looks just like it does in the Mixamo website. So now we have two new animations, and we're going to get more throughout this course, but for now, our next steps are to get these animations working for our skeletal mesh, Echo. And we'll do that next. I'll see you soon.